All right. Well, Emma Grigson, thank you so much for having a chat with me. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Your career is kind of a hard thing to encapsulate, so you're going to have to correct me on some of this probably here, but 2 decades in the Australian Defence Force, a multitude of roles across intelligence, operations, you name it, within that span, including some time in disease planning, which I'm interested to touch on with you. And now a multitude of roles across the world of health, the world of sport, you name it, director, involved in the front line. Thank you for making the time to have a chat.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. Really happy to.
So I wanted to jump in. I think one of the things that's really interesting, and it's probably not something I had appreciated until I was lucky enough to spend some time out with the Defence Force a few years back on an operational exercise, is actually this idea in the military that you like kind of plan and plan and plan and plan so you can adapt, which to me sounded quite counterintuitive almost. It was like, hold on, a plan sounds like it gets disrupted by, adaptation. Those two things don't necessarily sound like they can coexist so meaningfully. But what have you learned from your time in the Army? And I know you actually studied leadership within the Defence Force as well, that is useful for this period of uncertainty that kind of COVID has thrown us into.
So the common saying was that your plan will fall apart once H hour happens, which is the start of when your plan was always going to start, or when the first bullets start flying. And so it wasn't that you planned for failure as such. It was more that you had a plan in your mind of exactly how you wanted to go, and you were aware of all the factors that were going to happen. But you always have to make sure that though you've got a plan, you're not rigid in that. Mm-hmm. So you're happy that you might know that you're going to go down this path or down this branch of what is happening, that you understand that you have, separate plans for, well, what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what if this happens? So it's planning to have no plan as well. Like it's planning to sort of know that everyone knows exactly what their job is, that everyone knows what's going to be happening, and so they can react the way that they've been naturally trained to react, and with all of the knowledge that they've been empowered with to be able to work that way, and with trust in their leader as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important when you sort of think about those leaders in those types of situations. This is another one. It's a global situation we've got at the moment with COVID. It's really important to have innovation to respond to what is happening, and innovation on a daily macro level, innovation on a daily global level, and then innovation to be able to look further out strategically as well. And I think one of those things that enables innovation is to be fast-paced, to be adaptable, but then to also be able to recognise the importance of being able to change moment by moment, and being able to have that trust that your team members have in you to make those decisions as any moment changes. So they know what the plan is, but they know it's not rigid. They know that you have the knowledge and they are trusting you to change that at any moment, given what the circumstances are and given what your knowledge and information are.
I feel like there's a whole lot of interesting things that go into the melting pot with that sort of conversation, because in part, I think one of the things that's interesting in this time is we're told to be really consistent and clear and maintain kind of the message and communicate. And then on the flip side, we're dealing with uncertainty and adaptation and the need to be really dynamic and responsive. How does a leader kind of navigate what feels like kind of two conflicting worlds there? How do you best kind of communicate to your people?
I think the key thing there is that it's your communication that needs to be consistent. So your style of communication, so being calm, making sure that your messages are clear, making sure that you're not evoking more fear in people, and that you're giving people information. That's what needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
As opposed to that you have to give the same information all of the time, or that people are going to expect the same message all of the time. It's more just saying to people, right, good morning, how are you? This is the information for today, and giving it to them in perhaps a similar layout so that they're comfortable and they're calm and they know things are happening. But the changing information, the changing environment, taking that and making it into something that people are less afraid of, I think that's the key component. So it's a really good question, because the two do seem really different, because things are changing on a day-to-day, in fact, sometimes hour-by-hour basis. But if we keep our style of communication and take that changing information and put it into that more familiar style, and that way that it doesn't evoke more fear, and I guess, more terror amongst people, we're going to have far more success in the way that we're communicating that to people.
I really like that point around kind of take control of what you can, and you can control your tone, you can control your process or the format it's coming in or the time of day or week that you're communicating, so you can give people some certainty amongst the sea of uncertainty. I think that's a really, really good point I haven't heard yet.
Absolutely. And I think that that's, really key, whether it's that you're homeschooling kids or whether it's that you're, working from home, those sorts of things. Those key points are, if you've got some level of consistency, if you exert some kind of control, you're not going to feel less like, that tiny tadpole in a giant ocean. You're going to feel more like, okay, this is a sizable little pond that I can have more of an effect in. And I think that does a lot to calm people's fears a bit more. I mean, this is a really important and a really unheard of type time. I mean, unless you go back a few years, and we can talk about those historical examples in a minute if you want, but this is a really important time, and it should be scary to an extent, but it shouldn't be scary to the extent that we have people acting in crazy ways or in ways that are hurtful to the community. And so that consistency and that control where we can get it is really helpful in allowing people to feel that they haven't lost all control.
You touched on, obviously, go back a few years, we've got some examples of things we can maybe draw some stock from. I think a lot of the characterization of COVID in the reporting is how unprecedented it is, that we really have to go well back in history to be able to find any kind of equivalent pandemic. You've spent time looking at disease control, working in this area within the armed forces. What, if anything, is your kind of rule of thumb for how you're looking at this and evaluating the dynamism? What do you think we're in for in that regard? Or are there lessons from history that you think we should be having more of a conversation about right now?
I think there absolutely are lessons from history. There are a lot of people, a lot of very, very smart people who investigate diseases, doctors, scientists, etc., who have been just waiting for the next pandemic because we have diseases like this that can spread a lot. And, I'm not sure if you're all over the science of it, but obviously, so a novel virus comes from animals. And the World Health Organization, they track these because usually they'll stay within a species group. And then it's a problem when they mutate and then they move from an animal species to another species. So usually from animal to human. So pigs to human in the case of swine flu or H1N1, for example. And this creates a problem because we don't have any natural or acquired immunity to this disease. The RNA sequencing of the virus is not common. Our immune system doesn't recognize it, and then we can't fight it. And so these mutations usually then take a while. So going from the species to human takes a while, and then being able to go from human to human takes a while. Mm-hmm. And the reason why this is unprecedented is because that going from animal to human, that first step happened, and that happened in China, they believe, at the moment, near some Wuhan meat markets, from a bat to a human. But that second step, that human to human, which usually takes quite a while to happen, only took 2 weeks for that mutation to occur. And so that transmission, that's why we've seen it happen so quickly. And I think that's why people are saying this is unprecedented, because it not only made that mutation quite quickly, but then it's made a mutation into 2 strands quite quickly. Mm-hmm. So we've got an L strand and we've got an S strand. And this is why it's so different and why we're seeing it move so fast, because we haven't had the time to investigate it and to figure out what we can use to fight it, and scientists haven't been able to get onto it as quickly. Whereas others, we've had that time between when it's gone from animal to human before it's gone human as quickly to investigate it more. But I mean, you go back to Spanish flu, and there was between 50 to 100 million cases of Spanish flu, wow, which is more than all and deaths. Sorry, I should be clear. Deaths, and that's more than all the people we lost in World War I and World War II put together. So that's a large amount of people, and that it was a huge loss to our population. So I think that, there are lessons that we can learn, H1N1, SARS, MERS. There are lots of lessons that we can learn from things that have moved quite quickly, that have been novel viruses, as they're called, that have happened before. But then also we can learn about our behaviours and what we do. So, as these restrictions come in, a lot of people feel, oh, it's really piecemeal, we don't know what's going on. But it's also because science is playing a fair bit of catch up. So they know some lessons from before, but they don't know all the answers from before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, completely. And honestly, one of the most digestible explanations of what I feel like we're going through in the spread. So thank you for that, because I feel like one of the big challenges of the here and now is just the amount of information we're being bombarded with. And to your point around the piecemeal side of things, it does feel every day, not necessarily like our understanding is changing, though I appreciate that is evolving, but the response certainly is changing. What we're expected to do, the level of lockdown, shutdown, the restrictions on personal movement and interaction. When it comes to kind of, again, bringing into our own sphere of influence what we can control, what are your most important messages based on what you've learned and studied that you could share with leaders out there for how they can look after themselves and their families, but also their people?
So, having worked in healthcare, and I've got a lot of family who work in healthcare as scientists, nurses, and within disease as well. So I'm a big advocate for the stay at home if you can. And not just if you can, but even if it causes some slight inconveniences, staying at home, self-isolating and practicing those basic hygiene methods are all really fantastic options in terms of, from a leader's perspective, adopting those personal habits, but then promoting those habits through your workforce if that is an option for you. So remote working, and allowing people to not only do their work, but have their kids at home as well. That's a really important factor in being able to have people, have less opportunity for their children to catch things and bring things home, but also have less opportunity to spread things and put others at risk. Because the thing about this is it's not just about looking inwardly at ourselves, it's about looking at the community as well. And so I think each leader has a part to play in that. It's not just about their organisation, it's about the wider community that they're in as well. And I think as leaders, if they've got people who are doing it difficult, it's an understanding of that. It's having an empathy with that. And look, people won't be able to do everything. I know, for example, casual workers, that's a huge one. Some of the governments, state governments, are really pushing to be able to pay casual workers. And that's a really difficult one, because you have casual workers who want to show up to work. And sometimes they'll say, well, I'm showing up to work even if I'm sick or not because I want to get paid. And that's really hard because that promotes spreading an illness. And from the leader's point of view, from the boss's point of view there, well, they sort of go, well, I don't want to spread an illness amongst my community because that's a big loss long-term to my business. But then also the other option for me there is I've got to pay my workers to not come. Well, I guess a leader is going to have to weigh up what the cost is to them short term and what the cost is to them long term. I'm not a business expert, so I'm not going to make that call for them, but I guess it's just looking at things short term and long term as a leader. So looking at what are the long term impacts and what are the short term impacts, and how can I minimize those long term impacts? And I think that the best advice is that stay at home, self-isolate, and try and make sure that your habits personally and then community-wise are protecting everyone long-term as much as possible.
Totally. I want to pick up on that piece around leaders making plans right now and kind of circle back to something you were talking about earlier, which is that idea that kind of, the plan stops working the moment the first bullet's fired. What happens when you've kind of found yourself in the middle of something you didn't even have a plan for? Because there's a lot of people right now who did not have a scenario plan for the fact that they would have to close their restaurant or cafe, that they would have to stand down 70% of their workforce as an immediate response because they can't function as normal. Do you have any advice from finding yourself in scenarios, and I no doubt that happened many a times operationally in the field, where you truly were not prepared for the circumstance you found yourself in, and how you work your way through that to come up with some semblance of a response or a plan?
Yeah, look, I guess the first thing I'd want to say is that there is so much devastation going on with people losing their jobs. It's of a scale that I know I've not seen in my lifetime, and it's heartbreaking. So that would be the first thing I would say. Secondly, I would say that, when I was faced with certain situations where I was like, oh my goodness, I have not even considered this. I have not thought of this. This has not even come on my radar. the very first thing that I did was go to the experts that I had at hand. I had a pretty broad knowledge across most of the things that I needed to have a broad knowledge across, but I had usually at hand several experts in certain things. So, for example, here in South Australia, our Chief Public Health Officer is Associate Professor Nicola Spurrier, and she's been a fantastic source of information for South Australia in terms of what's going on here at the moment. And she posts regular updates. She has lots of information that she's writing and sending out to the community. So here, if I was a business owner in South Australia, I'd be going direct to that source and finding that information. But yeah, I'd go to subject matter expertise and I would get their information about, okay, what's the best information I can arm myself with to make decisions as the situation is changing. And so that would be my first step. Mm-hmm. Get the information and get it from experts. The second step is working as a team. I think that is absolutely crucial at times like this. You might be the leader, but that doesn't mean you always have all the answers. And the biggest thing about leadership is it's not petty. Leadership is about doing the best for your team, doing the best for your organization, doing the best for your nation, whatever it is that you're leading. And it's not petty. It doesn't sit there and go, but I must have the answer. And unless it's my answer, it's not right. No, leadership is about going, okay, where can I get the best information? So you've done that step one. And now how can I use all of this to come up with the best plan? And so I think teamwork is probably the second point. Get the information, then get your head people that are part of your key leadership team together and go, right, okay, what do we do from here? How do we change from here? How do we best accommodate our organisation or our people whilst also keeping an eye on that community picture? And I think that that's really important for everyone to consider in this particular situation. And that's what I would always do. So it might be moving to my warrant officers who had really important information about certain situations that were going on, and then I would call them into me, as well as perhaps maybe my captain or lieutenant, and just go, okay, right, what do we need to do? Okay, yep, thank you for that, thank you for that, thank you for that, right, this is what I think is good, what do you think? And what we would call war game, mm-hmm. or red teaming, those sorts of terms, but basically just run through what we would think is the best. And then others of us would shout out, yeah, but this might happen. And yeah, but this might happen. What do we do? And we would come up with solutions for that, how that would happen. And
I love that point around stress testing the plan, making sure you've got people that are throwing in the counterfactual and saying, hold on a minute, what if?
Absolutely. And look, I always found myself as the leader, especially, I liked to play that role, mm-hmm. Because, even if it was my plan or my point, I liked to go, oh, hang on a minute, but this might happen. Oh, damn it. Okay, well, let's change that. Let's think of this. How can we do that together? So, and obviously the twisted side of me in my previous job as the Director of Disaster Preparedness and Resilience here in South Australia, I loved playing that role because that's the role who gets to go, hey, are you ready to go at 2 a.m. in the morning? But that aside, it's a great way. So you call it stress training against the plan. We called it war gaming, mm-hmm. But it's just going through, okay, we're going to do this. Okay, does that work? Yeah, it does. No, it doesn't. Why? How do we change? And moving it. So it's just really fastly, I guess, going through in pretend time what you want to do in real time and checking and making sure that all those factors you need to consider are being taken into account and that they're being addressed. So, the welfare of, for me, it was always the welfare of my soldiers. Am I going to still be able to do my mission? What is the mission? Is this still working towards it? What are my tasks? Am I still achieving those? Yes, I am. Okay. So it's just making sure that everything's still aligned to that. What are my values? Am I still aligned to those? So, they would probably be my 3 steps. Getting SMEs in, double checking all of your information, all of it's right, teamwork, and then war gaming. They were the 3.
At the same time, being very clear on where are we tracking towards and is this still achieving against the mission direction?
Absolutely. And that comes out in your war gaming. Yeah.
Great. And one of the things about team was just making me think too about, at a time where we're appropriately for public health reasons, practicing social distancing and isolation and you name it, how important it is to find ways of virtually bringing that team together. Or if you do happen to find yourself in a situation where you're a freelancer or in the gig economy or trying to be entrepreneurial right now because of the circumstances COVID's put you in, to reach out and connect with people online, ask for input on LinkedIn and other platforms on social media, and find ways of digitally bringing that tribe of people together that you can throw ideas around with or seek that support from.
It is absolutely crucial. There's been a lot of chatter on, I know LinkedIn especially, there's been a huge amount of chatter. Oh, how do I still connect with my networks? How do I reconnect with people? How do I do this? Well, you're doing it. You reach out, like still communicate. There's things called phones. They're not just for text messaging and checking. They're actually for talking to people. So, write a letter, write an email, and actually use it to communicate. And I think that's a huge point. I think the biggest thing when it comes to leadership is relationships. And in times like this, funnily enough, in times of crisis, the biggest thing is relationships as well. Relationships, I know when I was the director here, relationships was my number one priority, because you need to make sure that you have relationships with all of these key people, and that these relationships are built on trust, they're built on two-way respect, they're built on sharing of information, they're built on great communication. And, if you work to make sure that those relationships are still working, then in a time of crisis, people will turn to you, and you know who you can turn to as well. And those things will still work. We used to call them drills in the military. I still know, tilt, clock, clock, look. I get if I got ammunition or something happened with my weapon, tilt, clock, clock, look. That was the very first thing that I learned all the way back in 2001. Very first thing that I learned. And I still know that off by heart.
Brain in your muscle memory.
I know my action. I know what to do. And it was, I still say to my kids now, immediate action. When I had my first kids, it was immediate action when my baby cries. I check the nappy. Is he hungry? Is he, but these are things, drills, what we do. So in a time of crisis, what do? We speak to the people we trust.
Yeah.
So communication and relationships, they are the number.
I love one of the things you flagged there too for me, because it was something I was thinking about this morning. So it's that immediate action piece and knowing what steps we can take to be reactive and responsive. But I also love that point, and you just mentioned it in passing around that idea of writing a letter. And I was thinking this morning about like Daniel Kahneman's like think fast, think slow. And this notion of how do we make sure at a time like this we're engaging both parts of the brain. So absolutely system one is on, and it's being reactive, and it's responding to information on a need by need basis and making sure that we're doing what we need to do in the here and now. But that we're also creating that time for that deliberative, slower process thinking, where we're really taking in the various factors we need to be considering, and we're creating space for a very different style of thinking, which perhaps allows us to be more innovative, perhaps just allows us to think about a situation more deeply or in a more considered manner. And that those two need to coexist. We need to be creating space and time and using processes in a way that allows both of them to function, even though we might be relying on more system one right now because we're having to put out fires than we are system two.
Absolutely. I think that, I don't want to call them positives. They're not positives, but, the slowing down, I mean, this has caused everyone to have to slow down.
Yeah.
I take more time to read with my children. I take more time to be writing things down. I take more time to have conversations with people, as opposed to rushing from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next. And I think that, you've got to take the time to make sure your computer's set up. Zoom, I wish I'd brought shares in Zoom, but
true.
Making sure that it's on all of my different devices so that I can have those meetings and conversations that I need to have. But it's even those small things, just taking the time and doing those with purpose is a way that we're sort of slowing down, as well as doing all the things we need to do to be reactive.
I can ask you, one of the things that never ceases to amaze me about the kind of the capabilities that military leaders build is that calm under pressure. And that ability to make decisions in the throes of situations those of us civilians who've never been in that sort of scenario probably can't even mentally comprehend. What advice have you got for how to take stock or look after yourself, remain calm as you're going through the sea of uncertainty that people are dealing with right now?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always knowledge. The motto for the intelligence corps here in the Australian Army is forewarned is forearmed,
I like it.
Which I love. I'm a big advocate for education, and that people should never stop learning, no matter what form that learning takes. And for me, knowledge and pursuing knowledge has always been a way to calm me down. So if, when this festival came out, it was straight to some of my old databases and some of my old contacts and, okay, so what are we doing? What's going on? Just finding out information and just reading and making myself as knowledgeable as possible, because I really do believe that whole knowledge is power, and then trying to share that as much as possible. I had lots of friends contact me going, do I buy, 20 crates of toilet paper? No, you don't need to do that. This disease doesn't cause diarrhea. You'll be fine. But, just when you have knowledge, you feel calmer. I think you can feel better about things. You have knowledge within you. And I think that for me, that's always been my way to feel calmer. I know about this, so I can feel better. I think that military teaches you that as well. When you're facing a situation, you go, I know how to deal with this. I've either dealt with it before, or I know how to calm people down because I can communicate with them, I can empathize with them, I can lead them. And then I guess the other part of it is that the military also teaches us how to have that element of self-care. So we used to call them FFIs, like foot inspections. Basically, you check the welfare of your people, check their feet are okay. They're always wearing those manky socks and boots. Make sure people are checking their crotches so they don't have crotch rot as well, and that they're clean, that they've cleaned themselves, that they're hygienically clean. And basically, you could do the same for yourself as well. You and the 2IC, you do the same for yourself as well. And I think that it's important, perhaps maybe not to check your feet and check your crotch at the moment, but to do that from a mental point of view.
Yes.
To just sort of say, okay, whether you've got a husband, a boyfriend, your mum, your dad, your dog, whatever it is that you're using, go to yourself and say, okay, right, have I, had a bath today? Have I, gone and had a walk or done some yoga or whatever it is that helps me feel physically calm? For me, it's a walk with my kids, or playing some basketball in the backyard with my kids. And, have I done that today? Yes, I have. So is my physical and mental well-being okay? So do I have knowledge? And then am I physically and mentally okay? And once those two things are there, I feel I could handle anything. So
awesome. And I love that point around knowing what those things are for you and building them in, like, intentionally from a routine standpoint. And this is probably, may or may not be a segue, but I'm mindful of your time, and I wanted to finish by asking you mentioned this idea of immediate response. I think one of the things you also touched on there is this notion of like habit and routine, and how important having those things to anchor to in times like this are.
You're going to ask me what my routine is?
What's that?
You're not going to ask me what my routine is, are you?
No, I was going to ask if you could make a suggestion to those listening for something that might be valuable for their own routine or their own response right now. What suggestion would you offer?
The suggestion I would offer is don't do my routine. Is to try and keep your daily routine as much as possible. So if your routine is that you usually wake up and you go to a 6 a.m., aerobics class or something, and then, have your shower and go to the office or whatever, still do that. But obviously you can't go to your aerobic class or whatever. So go out into your backyard and do some PT, physical training, acronyms everywhere. Go out into your backyard and do something. Try and keep your routine. And I would suggest it for kids as well. So I'm not a psychologist, but I would suggest that for kids as well, it's the same. It's if you keep routine, that we all find comfort in routine. There's a reason why when babies are really small, they cry at almost the same time, when they're just out, they cry at, certain times, every 4 hours almost on the dot. Routine makes us feel comforted. It makes us feel happy. In army, we use routines, nighttime routine, morning routine. We use routines to allow people to feel, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what's going on. It gives us a sense of calm and it gives us a sense of confidence. So in times like this, holding on to your routine as much as possible, even if you're transferring some things from, going to your local yoga gym or Pilates studio to doing it in your room.
Yep, having to adapt naturally. Yep.
Yeah, just try and do it. And, dress as if you're going to work. Still have your shower, still put your makeup on if that's the thing that you do, or do your hair or whatever it is. I would suggest keep everything as normal as possible, because within the guidelines of what we have, obviously, don't go out and do your pub nighttime quiz every Monday night. Maybe get together on a Skype chat or something and do your quiz that way. But keeping routine as close as possible, and most of the academic reading I've done on this is the same. Keeping your routine as close as possible is the best thing for our mental well-being, and it just gives us a sense of calm and confidence that nothing else can replace.
Awesome. What a great bit of advice. Emma, I've really loved chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights from your military career, your specialisation in the intelligence world, the disease management world, and just your insights more broadly on leadership. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's been absolutely my pleasure, Holly. Really, it has.